Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for being able to participate in this meeting. I have the questions prepared, but like I did in the other connection for ACS 554, I would invite everybody to briefly present themselves, and we will start with Mark Hazelin. Tell your name, your company, in brief what you do over there for the students, and again, name, level of studies, where you are at SIUE, and what do you want to do in the future. Thanks.
Sure. So pleased to meet you all virtually. I'm Mark Haslin, and I work in Washington, D.C. at Xenophon Strategies, which is a PR firm where about 20 years old. We represent full service, we call it, which means we do all the things that a PR firm does. We represent a lot of people, organizations that want to affect public policy, legislation, regulation. So a lot of associations, also companies from around the country and around the world. We actually don't represent that many organizations in Washington or companies that are trying to do lifestyle things in Washington. A lot of people in a different city might have a little bit different experience than I in the US. We do work with international organizations. Usually they want to affect what's happening in the US or have media relations or communications in the US that we can help them with. So we can sort of help them translate what they're doing to Americans versus Americans trying to reach other countries around the world, other cultures around the world. We do a lot of work in media relations and social media, digital media, crisis communications, issue advocacy, and other things as well. So we do have clients who are based in other parts of the world, in Canada, France, Uzbekistan. I'll probably talk about them a little bit. And obviously through my participation in the PRGN, I get a lot of exposure to how PR works in other parts of the world, just because we meet twice a year. We have these calls every, once a month. So I really enjoy the opportunity to learn about other, how PR works in other parts of the world. Krista, Krista can briefly explain what she does. Go ahead, I'll answer your questions.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Krista Crouch, Novitas Communications. I'm located in Denver, Colorado. I am the vice president here at Novitas, and so I ensure that our clients that we are abiding by our contracts and strategies that we have set up with our clients, and that our team is moving work forward. And then I also assist a lot with the business development, making connections out in the marketplace. And while we are located in Denver, we are also working on we work with other states and sometimes other countries. For example, right now we have a client located in Haiti. So we're not, most of our clients are currently in Colorado, but we do work on others. So what we do here at Novitas Communications is very similar to what Mark and Xenophon does. We focus on corporate communications, crisis communications, digital media, issue management, public relations, and sometimes we're working to get the story in the news, and sometimes we're working to keep the story out of the news. And so we really work on the messaging around our clients' issues, and we mostly work in highly regulated issues, meaning healthcare, insurance, oil and gas, banking, education, and so we currently have a new tech client who is, I know that we're on a Zoom right now, but the client is a, how do I want to say it? It's an event platform to combine virtual and in-person events so that events can be more inclusive, right? I mean, COVID has really changed the way that we attended events for a year, and that the way that we attended events during COVID and the way we did before COVID is going to change drastically moving forward. And so they have developed a platform and re-engineered their platform during COVID to be a more inclusive event platform. And then we've got some other tech clients as well. So we don't work with any we don't work on, we work on ballot initiatives. We don't work on campaigning for anyone, and we don't do any lobbying, but we work closely with lobbyists to put pressure on certain legislative districts, or we work with, you know, on the no side or the yes side of specific ballot measures here in the state of Colorado. I kind of rambled on. Let me know if you have any questions.
That's good, thank you.
No, there's no such thing. Thank you very much for the information. I will start from you know, from the point of view of the group from SIUE. I'm Sorin Anastasia. I'm an associate professor of public relations in the Department of Applied Communication Studies at this university with the logo behind me, SIUE, Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. We are actually a university from the 50s, located in the metro area of St. Louis, St. Louis being in Missouri and our university in Illinois, but it's 20 minutes drive from downtown St. Louis. I am talking actually right now from South County, St. Louis, which is 35 minutes from my university. And when I'm supposed to go over there, I commute. You know, I was able in the past year and a half to do things mainly from home. We are coming back in the fall with a vengeance. Okay, so my background in public relations is that you know, I did a master in public relations in Romania. I'm originally from Romania. Then I did a PhD in communication and public discourse with a concentration in public relations. I came in the United States in 2003. I was hired by SIUE in 2009. I became a citizen in 2016. So I've been through all the phases of adapting to the society here, but also to, you know, from assistant professor to associate professor, and actually qualify for becoming full professor, so I will be applying. But I'm also the graduate director in our department and the director of the International Studies program, which is in the same College of Arts and Sciences since 2016. Okay, I will invite my students to present themselves. Le Fong Tu, who goes by Lily.
Hello everyone, my name is Lily and I'm international student. I come from Vietnam. I came in the US 2019 and I was stuck in here from the pandemic, so I cannot come back my country. My major is media production and minor is applied communication. But for my minor, I want to study, like, understand about public relation. So that's the reason I in this class. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm done.
Who's next?
Yeah.
Soren, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I thought I unmuted myself. So let's go with Millie next.
Hello, again, my name is Millie. I am a first year graduate student at SIUE. I just graduated after a year and a half of being at home with COVID, with my degree, my bachelor's degree in ACS with a focus in public relations, minor in mass communications. I am a non-traditional student with 4 children. My daughter's birthday is actually today, so she turned 10, and my oldest is 14. So it's taken me a while to get to here, but I haven't stopped. And which is why I'm continuing on to my master's. We just thought in my family that it would be a good idea for me to continue on because the world of public relations is kind of unclear right now, and there's not a whole lot of jobs around us. Go away. Sorry.
Like the cats, we like the cats.
My focus again will be in public relations, but ideally I would like the idea of teaching in the future. I did a stint in AmeriCorps in 2018 with a nonprofit, so I'm in love with the nonprofit sector, but I also love entertainment, international, anything, though I've never been out of the country. And I just want to see where the next 2 years will take me.
Thank you very much. Sarah Coughlin.
Okay, I'm Sarah. I am probably the only student who's not as involved into the PR industry and things. I'm a teacher. I just finished my 13th year teaching. I have a master's in curriculum and education from SIUE, and I am also a collaborative teacher with SLU, or I will be this fall, and I'm working on obtaining 18 credit hours at this time to be a dual credit teacher for public communications at the high school level. So that's why I'm taking this class.
Okay, and I see that we have, again, Abby Fink. So she can present herself, but she is part of the PRGN network.
Good morning. Sorry I was a few minutes late. As I shared with the other class, one of the things I do is serve as an issues management crisis communications spokesperson here in town. And so the local Fox affiliate wanted to do a story on Christy Teigen and her recent tweet apology and cancel culture. So I popped off, did that, joined back on. I had the ear hits. Technology is amazing. But I'm here in Scottsdale, Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona with HMA Public Relations. We're a full service PR and marketing communications firm. We are celebrating our 41st year in business, which makes us the oldest continuously operating firm in the state. We are also one of the founding agencies of the Public Relations Global Network, and we'll be celebrating the network's 30th anniversary here in Phoenix next year, May of 22, at our first in-person meeting in 2.5 years. So we're very excited to see each other. Our agency specializes primarily in media relations, issues in crisis communications and digital for a variety of different clients, professional services, nonprofit, government, and we also do quite a lot of work with the tribal governments, Native American communities in the Southwest.
Okay, thank you very much. So then let's proceed with the questions. I have several questions here from my students, and as I mentioned before, I have about 10 students in the class, but only 8 generated questions and only 3 are present in the discussion. I told them that if they are busy at this period of time, they can watch the recording that I will post on my YouTube channel. So let's start with the questions. What do you think of Latin America's style in forming relationships before they conduct business? Do you think this style is more beneficial in regards to international public relations?
That's a good question. So, so we might not be able to answer every one of these with real personal experiences. You know, as I mentioned earlier, I'm from Washington. I've never really worked in Latin America directly. When I have, it's been with other PR agencies that I'm generally affiliated with, and I would say that that would be a helpful thing to build relationships with people. And we do it here in the U.S. too. Maybe not to the same degree or the same style you guys, the question is referring to, but you know, having relationships with people in the industry you're trying to affect, and with journalists in particular, is helpful. If you can call up somebody on the phone and say, "Hey, it's Mark," versus, "Hi, I'm working with this company and I've never met you before," well, you're going to get a lot further if they know you and they know your background. So developing those relationships is really helpful. So I think it's important. I don't know, maybe Abby or Krista has some other thoughts on that.
I agree. Sorry. Oh, go ahead, Abby.
No, you go ahead. I was trying to find, I thought we did a survey somewhere on that topic. So I was trying to find it on our blog. So you go ahead,
Okay.
Nan.
Sorry, I'm eating crackers too. Yes, to Mark's point, you know, the way that Novitas Communications here in Denver has really leveraged the PRGN network is through a variety of ways. But one of the ways most recently is we're working with our partner in San Francisco, where there is a large LGBTQ plus population, and there's a large set of publications also there. One of our clients located here in Denver, but works internationally, has a chat bot for to help employees be more inclusive around the LGBTQ plus to be more inclusive in the workplace, but also when they're communicating with clients and customers. And so, you know, we haven't really delved into the LGBT community as far as working on a chatbot to be more inclusive in the past, and we haven't really had relationships with publications before. And so currently one of our other PRGN partners has, and so we relied on their expertise and, you know, had a conversation with them about who they know and what connections they have so that we could start up conversations with some of the reporters for those specific publications. So that's a very, very tactical way that we currently are working on. So as Mark mentioned, those relationships are invaluable. You know, I've worked internationally in Germany. We're currently working, like I mentioned at the top of the call, in Haiti, you know, and we're working internationally too. So, you know, I was doing some tourism with USA Today at one of my previous careers, and I emailed that reporter to ask, you know, who would be willing to, that I could talk with about some tech. And so, you know, maintaining those relationships with reporters yourself, but also, you know, other connections that you have who have relationships with is very beneficial.
Right, and I can add here that actually last summer, when I was teaching another PR class, PR Visual Communication, I was able to establish through another network of journalists a connection with a journalist from Argentina, who told us about this particularity in Latin America of establishing relationships that count and that are, you know, they are relevant because of their cultural background. It's a Catholic, mostly Catholic, all of them are Catholic countries. And they have culturally an insistence on family relationships. Yes, so it all comes from there. You don't trust somebody who is not a family person. You have to know their family to see how they interact in their own personal environment, to be invited at a family event, to be invited at a you know, personal event, and then be considered part of the family, and then the business relationship will be a more trustworthy one. So that was in the background of these kinds of relationships. It's all cultural.
Mm-hmm.
Well, even us coming into your classroom is it based on a relationship, right? I mean, think about the how that our executive director for the network is in Budapest, connecting with a professor in the States that brought together us. And I think, to Krista's point, relationships are so critical, and the truth is they happen all the time, and we're smarter when we recognize them, right? It's why I am always happy to say yes when I'm invited into a classroom to speak or to do an informational interview with a young professional or an older professional that's re-careering, because you never know where they're going to end up and what they're going to do. And I was, this is several years ago, I was asked at the last minute to do an interview with a student who, you know, clearly forgot to do their last assignment and had 2 weeks before the end of the semester to interview, you know, a professional and write the profile. And she caught me at the right time, and I told her she had 30 minutes and she better make the best use of that 30 minutes. And if she was 1 minute late, then she only had 29 minutes because I really didn't have enough time. And she interviewed me and we had a really nice conversation, and she followed up with a thank you note. And after the class, she sent me a copy of the paper with, you know, with that she had gotten an A with the teacher's comments. And we stayed in touch, you know, LinkedIn and some things over the years. And about, I don't know, maybe 8 years later, she reached out that she was now the director of public relations at a major company here in the Phoenix area. And they were looking for PR assistants. And the only PR person she wanted to talk to was me. Now, trust me when I tell you, I wasn't that fantastic in my interview with her 30 minutes, you know, 10 years ago. But the relationship that we developed meant that she had somebody she could call. And so I don't think it's always the obvious one sometimes that, you know, we need to nurture all those types of relationships, because we really don't know, you know, where the new business is going to come from, where the next reporter that we want to work with is going to end up, right? They left this market to go to another market. Our colleagues will, you know, have relationships that will be beneficial. So one of my very first bosses told me what we really are in is public relationships, and rather than public relations. And I think that's a very true statement.
Okay, and actually that brings us back to a reality of public relations even nowadays, that the best way to convince people to become the consumers of your services or products is to interact with them in an interpersonal way. If the clearest way to convince somebody is to meet with them face to face. You all know the reality of this, that actually somebody can look at the website, somebody can look at an article, somebody can look at the product on a shelf, or the commercial advertising and so on and so forth. But it's always more convincing if a friend will talk to you, introduce you to the product or to the services, and say that they are content. This kind of snowball effect is the most effective one, even nowadays with so much technology.
Mm-hmm.
Still the human element. Okay, should we move to the next question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I see a relevant one here. Do you think it is possible for large political organizations, such as the European Union, to effectively have a PR strategy that would accommodate differences in political practices and cultural norms in the various nations that it represents?
I'd like to think so.
Yes, and no. The EU is probably the largest example I could even think about in that regard. But I mean, a lot of the clients we represent are associations or member organizations, and they don't all agree. A lot of times they're competitors. They don't have the same, they don't want to share information with each other. They don't agree with each other. They don't see things the same way. But on the other hand, they're part of an association for a reason. They have a common ground. They have some things they all do agree about. And that's where the basis for the communication starts, and where the agreement is, not where the disagreements are. So we would put together a communication strategy that achieve that. I will say this though, it gets complicated and it gets hard to do. You get stuck in a lot of logjam and a lot of gridlock, basically, where you can't achieve as optimally as you could if you had one leader who got to say, this is what we're doing.
Right.
We worked with a coalition of tribal leaders, Native American tribal leaders, about, well, it's probably close to 30 years ago now, when the tribes were lobbying the state of Arizona for a gaming compact, a tribal gaming compact, gambling. And those were 22 elected officials, right? Each tribe is a sovereign nation and elects their own leadership. So 22 elected officials that had the same goal, but had it for very different reasons, and we're going to be impacted by it very differently. And we were working with one of the attorneys that was representing the tribe, one of the tribes. And what we told them back then was that if you want this to pass, you have to speak from one voice with one purpose. And they were new enough in this sort of lobbying environment and looking to enact legislation, that they were willing to listen to that recommendation and that advice. Now, they didn't always agree, as Mark said, and to find consensus sometimes would be, long discussions. But the benefit of coming together and speaking as one voice, and then putting that information out into the community, the larger community, ultimately got the legislation, and 25, 30 years later, we have this economic engine for tribal communities that didn't exist before. And to this day, when faced with a challenge to that legislation, that group will come together. And now it's newly elected officials, right? That's the other challenge with governments is, you know, depending on your constitution, they change, and new voices, and you want new voices, but sometimes those voices don't agree with the voices that spoke the last 4 years. And so it's a very different type of communications. And you know, I think for a lot of us, we won't work with individuals. We will work with issues because people kind of get a little cumbersome to manage sometimes, but issues that can, you know, impact communities and such. And I think with something like the EU or any large, you know, public entity like that, it's really about wrangling the people and getting them to be in agreement for the better of the whole. I mean, that's where it has to come down to. It's not an individual discussion. It's about what's for the best interests of all of us and all that we represent. And that's complicated.
Right. I can share you my personal experience because 97 to 2001, I was working as a counselor in the Ministry of Culture, International Relations in the Unit for European Integration. At the time, Romania wanted to be part of the next wave of admission into the European Union. And, you know, there are different stages of admission into the European Union. We were accepted in 2007 with full rights as member of the European Union. That means that you have to adapt your, what they call in French, acquis communautaire, the body of legislation that is adapting to the legislation of the European Union. For example, even the standards for beer bottles, something as trivial as that, has to be the same as the European Union. Why? Because, you know, like Bill Clinton famously said, it's the economy stupid. You cannot have a standard of producing bottles for beer and then trying to export that beer in the European Union because they won't be able to recycle them and so on and so forth. So they have to be the same standard. And that's from a trivial example, but think about, you know, how do you build the cars? How do you build any electronics, anything that can be exported, imported, and so on and so forth, to have this kind of easiness to send products and services over the borders of the countries of the European Union. So Romania has become a member with full rights in 2007, but to be a member of the European Union, you have to pay a ticket every year to have access to a pool of money to which you apply as organizations from that country of origin with projects, and the projects will win. And you know, if people are not educated and they don't know how to do project management in a modern style, they usually don't get those projects. So for a while, in the first years, you know, Romania was paying the ticket, which was very expensive, but not many companies were getting the benefit of applying to those projects. Nowadays, the change have changed. The situation has changed, and there are more and more companies who win such projects. I participated at the time from 97 to 2001 in a tender. Initially, there was a consortium of companies from Italy, Greece, and Great Britain who won for a European Union program for culture of 2 million euros. Establishing a fund for arts, specialists from culture in four Western countries for pilot projects around the country in 40 locations. So it was complicated. It was good. It was revelatory for the people involved in such projects. It showed us exactly like it is being asked in this question, the variety of how things are perceived in different countries. There's politics, there's the language barrier. Sometimes if you go to Brussels and you are sent officially from an administration part of your country, it sounds like the Tower of Babel over there. And there's like 30 people translating into closed boxes like at UN, and everybody's trying to the Italians have an expression, traduttore traditore. which means to be a translator, you will be a traitor also, because the cultural idiosyncrasies sometimes do not get translated well, and there is confusion. Okay, I hope I didn't ramble too much. Let's move to the next question. With advertising being at its peak, what can you do to save this industry?
To save the public relations industry?
Yeah.
Do we have the person who asked this question present today or no? Lily, did you ask this question?
No, it's not me.
Okay, I was supposing that, you know, the perception was that advertising is getting the cherry on the cake and PR is losing. So how can you save this industry? That was my perception too.
Yeah, I'll go first. There's the, you know, I think what the question presupposes is that you've got, it seems like the media is almost dying, right? Like they're going out of business. It's hard to make money through advertising model. And so, you know, to be a truly independent, creating your own editorial content, journalistic content is harder. But I think what you'll hear, I'm guessing what you'll hear from my other PRGN colleagues is that there's really never been a better time to be in public. There's so many more tools available to us now, so many more different ways to communicate. Certainly advertising and paid content is part of that, but everybody's a journalist. Everybody has a phone in their pocket and different ways to communicate and become an influencer. And so it's actually bigger, I think, than it was ever before, not smaller, even though the traditional media relations maybe plays a smaller piece of the pie in some ways. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what we learned in journalism school is nowhere even close to what we're doing as professionals today. You know, my PR education was one chapter in a book in my journalism program, and now you can get a degree in public relations. And I think what is being taught today, and even with classes like this, is that all of this has to work well together to be successful. And, you know, we use all these different tools and technologies and strategies differently depending on what messaging we're trying to get across, the types of clients that we're working on. Now, none of us would define ourselves as an advertising agency. We might call ourselves a public relations agency. We might call ourselves an integrated firm, because we recognize that there are lots of different ways to tell the story. It's no longer just, you know, relying on your local newspaper or your newscast to tell your story. Sometimes you have to own that information. Some of you might be familiar with kind of what we're all using these days, which is referred to as the PESO model, PESO, paid, earned, searched, and paid, earned, social, and owned. And all of that fits into what we do. So I may not buy media, but I certainly have clients that ask me to help them put together a media strategy, and I bring in partners that help me do that. And I do digital, but if they want to, you know, a digital strategy in a different way, I bring in people. So I think we have to work well and play well with our colleagues in the other disciplines, and recognize that there's a place for all of us. And based on the messaging and the product and the customer or the client itself, you know, that's where that information makes the most sense.
And I'll add on to what Mark and Abby said. You know, with the PESO model, we use the S, Abby, you guys may use it as social, we use it as shared. And so what that really means for us is what other, you know, no longer are we just trying to get a message out to newspaper readers or to television show watchers. We're really trying to get a specific message to a very niche audience. And we can reach those audiences through some of our partners. And so how can they share our messaging through their channels, whether it be their newsletter or their website or their social media, or, you know, whatever their communication channels open to them are. is to mark there's really more opportunities now for communications than what there were traditionally. Yes, some of the newspapers and TVs and stations and those types of things are going away, or don't have enough space or time or reporters available for our mass messaging, but that's really an opportunity for us to narrow our message to reach the intended audiences, right? And so I think there is more opportunity. I also think we as a public relations industry have to ensure that our messaging is on point so that when it gets to the intended reader, the intended audience, that he or she, it resonates with him or her, right? There's a lot more clutter to cut through. And so I think it's really important that your messaging is very attractive and eye-catching. And then finally, what I'll say is that while we are starting to see some of the larger, main TV stations or newspaper publications in big cities go away, we're starting to see a little bit of a resurgence of smaller, more newsworthy, trusted publications that just have 1 to 2 staff members that left the San Francisco Times, the New York Times, or whatever, and went out on their own and started these smaller publications to have more reign over the stories they get to write and not be so driven by editors who are, getting pushed by the advertising department to cover a story on X client that maybe isn't that newsworthy, right? And so we're starting to see a resurgence here in Colorado anyway, and I would say probably the Midwest. Abby, I don't know if you guys are seeing this too, of just these smaller publications with just a few employees that are really doing some investigative journalism. And so I think, as we continue to grow away from the main state paper or the main city newspaper, we're going to see a lot of these other smaller publications coming in and being opportunities for us as well.
One other thing I'd say about this, to bring it back to sort of the international perspective, is that I think traditionally the U.S. has had very strong laws to protect journalists, so journalists can write whatever they want and not suffer consequences of the state limiting that. Censorship is generally pretty open in the U.S., and that might be different than other countries around the world. And so if you think about the model that Abby sent there in that link, where earned is a circle of equal size to the other circles, maybe that's not true, or hasn't always been true everywhere. So paid and shared and owned get a larger, sort of piece of the pie, so to speak, than they have here. And I don't know if that's always true. There's probably not one way to just look at it everywhere around the world, but I think that might be the case.
Okay. Yeah, this is very important for the understanding of such issues. I wanted to see if we can ask another question here, and it's kind of long. An area that interests me the most in the world is Western Europe. Even with the Brexit happening in January 2020, there are still articles on the topic, as it is still causing things to happen almost 18 months later. I still am not sure what it all entails, only the major characteristics. How do you think PR is affecting the public's viewpoint of this hot topic? What could firms do to better educate the public on the causes and effects of the Brexit?
Well, I don't know that I can speak specifically to Brexit on its own, but I think it's an example of really the importance of who's leading the conversation and what information is being shared. And so I think so often what happens is there's not a discussion about all the potential outcomes of a decision. Now, Brexit is a big thing, right? I mean, they didn't just sit around and decide to do it and then next day it was done. I mean, there was a lot that went into it. And did they bring in a PR person to talk to them about it, or did their chief communications staff discuss it? I highly doubt that it did. But and we've talked a lot about this in the network because it did impact our global presence, and there were certainly agencies that were dealing with it in a different way than maybe we were here in the US. And so, for us, it was listening to our colleagues in the other parts of our network and what they were dealing with, and how is these discussions taking place? How will it change the way that we do business? Will we still be able to function the same way in this country versus that, or this place versus that, because of what was happening? And so, one of the things that I always talk about when I talk to up and coming professionals is, we have to be aware of what's happening around us in order to be successful for our little, bubble that we might be working in. And so I may not have a single client here in Phoenix, Arizona that gives two hoots about Brexit, right? I mean, it probably does not impact their day-to-day business, but we still have to know it's happening, because A, it's dominating the news cycle. It's what's happening. It's what's going to top the newspaper. It's what all the anchors are going to be talking about. And I might have the best thing that's happening to my local client that it deserves to be the top of the fold in the newspaper. But if Brexit is dominating the headlines, I don't stand a chance, right? So even if it's not actually impacting us, these global discussions, and because we have become a global society, it's not unlike what was happening, what's happening in the United States, the racial injustice and civil unrest and some of those discussions, and how that was impacting people in other countries and the businesses of other, even if it was not directly there. And so elections in other countries and the impact those might have on business operations. Even if you're not doing business with Israel, you need to know that they just had a prime minister change the first time in 12 years, and that impact that's going to have. And so Brexit is an example of what may not feel like it directly impacts you, but smart communicators at least know it's going on, and caution our clients about maybe today isn't the day, because this is the news that's happening. I can tell you, really, in the last 6 months, there's probably been 4 or 5 instances where I've sent a note out to my staff that said, let's not put anything out today because the George Floyd decision is happening, or President Biden is making his first public address, or our governor is going to be talking, or whatever it is, because we can't win. We aren't going to get in front of that. And so just being aware of these things, even if they're not directly related, is critically important to your success.
Yeah, and I can add again, because I'm coming from a country that is a member of the European Union, that was accepted in the last wave of enlargement of the European Union, is that we studied these things thoroughly. The origins of the European Union were from the 50s. France and Germany put together their resources. The Germans had more. Some people, Germans had more coal, and the French had more ore of metal, something like that. They put the resources together, so they didn't have to pay, excises for such materials crossing borders, and that gave them a boost in their industries. Especially construction of cars and big industrial endeavors. So that proved to be a success, especially because they were thinking about the reconstruction that was taking time after the Second World War. And then little by little, others wanted a piece of the pie, and they extended it to other countries. And eventually, actually, Great Britain accepted to be part of that, and only very, very late they moved to the euro. And actually the European Union is a very complicated thing, because some of the members have the possibility to, like I was explaining to you with Romania, to pay a ticket and participate in that pool of money with projects. And not all the members have that access. Not all the members have the euro, which changes things, right? I was observing that Greece, for example, changed their coin from drachma to the euro after 5,000 years. The drachma from the time of Socrates, and they dropped the drachma for the love of the European Union. And now they are discussing of going back because the euro that you know, the value of the euro is different in different parts of the European Union.
Mhm.
You can buy different things and you can earn less or more depending on where you live. Yes. Then how the workers can move over the borders.
Mhm.
You know, it's very important that people from the Czech Republic, the Slovak Republic, or Poland were able for a period of time to just commute over the border in Germany or Austria and stuff like that, and come very fast, you know, going in a bus in the morning, commuting and working somewhere and being paid over there and coming with the kind of money back into their families. Yes, and contributing to the local economy and to in time to the national economy. But the British were longing for their imperial past when they were a very huge power. And they wanted to, you know, the expression goes, they wanted to have the pie and eat it too. So they wanted to go back to those times in which they could decide prices on the European market, but they didn't want to have the disadvantage of having these people being accepted from Eastern Europe and other countries because they were members of the European Union, and they were allowed legally to come and work. Yeah. Oh no.
Well, I think the workforce is going to be an interesting element of this, in part because we can now literally work anywhere, right? If we are in a business that can work via technology. And I think as an industry, we are all experiencing that, and that, you know, now all of a sudden I don't have to hire somebody that lives here in the Phoenix area. I can hire someone for their talent wherever they are. But we're seeing some of the dialogue in the network's private chat rooms about some of our colleagues that have international employees, and, you know, culturally, how are they accommodating that? Financially, you know, how are they being paid? What are the ramifications and impact on having an international employee? You know, what protocols might be good workforce culture here in the States, may be different elsewhere. So this international discussion, you know, it is going to be one I think we all have to pay attention to. Again, even if we don't see it specifically happening in, you know, my 7-person office here in Phoenix, it's going to impact how we do business, you know, I think as we continue to be a very global society.
Yeah, for Great Britain, this had also political and economical, you know, implications, especially with Northern Ireland. You know, for a period of time, there was quiet and peace, no more revolution on the streets and people attacking the British military. It was awful between the 70s and the 90s. There are discussions now that that thing will come back because, you know, for a while last year, trucks were full of products from Ireland and from Great Britain were stopped at the border with Northern Ireland because nobody understood how to tax them. Was it in euro? Was it in pound? You know, what is acceptable if they are not part of the European Union? Who's doing business here? Who's taxing these things, and so on and so forth. So they understand, but they are losing a lot by not being part of the European Union. Yeah. Okay. Well, do you think we still have time for another question, or think
I need to go, but you all go. It was a pleasure meeting all of you, and I look forward to staying connected in the future.
Thank you very much for being able to participate in both discussions. I learned a lot from you.
I enjoyed it. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
I'll share my email address in the chat, but I do have to go too, but feel free to shoot me an email and we can stay connected.
Right. Then we can continue actually with the, you know, exchanging emails. If anybody wants to interact with you through email, then that would be very beneficial.
Yep.
Well, then I
Nice
will
meeting you
stop.
all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mark, I'm sorry that your colleague wasn't able to participate in the discussion, Gabor. I know that he would have had a lot of information from the European Union because he is from Budapest and he has been involved in business in the European Union.
Yeah, one of the tricks of this is the time zones. And so we always have our calls at 11 a.m. because it's the time when we can get the most people together from around the world.
Yes.
So you know, in Europe, what time is it now? It's almost 6 at
Yeah,
night.
well, it depends. It's 7
Yeah.
years for Great Britain, 8 years for Romania.
Yeah,
You know, for them, it's now
all the night.
8 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, when we will meet with the representative from Japan, actually, it's the next day, 14 hours later.
Yeah, yeah. So you have to do that at a convenient time for her. Okay, good.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I will save this and send the link for everybody.
Thank you all. Nice to meet you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks.